Morning, everyone. We'll just get started in a few minutes, so please just bear with us while we let everyone get joined. So we'll get started just in a few minutes. Just once again, for everyone just joining us, we will get started in just a couple of minutes. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I will just start the recording in just a second, and we will get started properly. Okay, all right. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are potentially joining us from in the world. So welcome, first of all, to the very first ever Transition to Glasgow Postgraduate Edition programme. This is the first time we've ever run this course, and we're really excited about it, and we're really glad that you've been able to join us today. And we really hope that you find the course useful in terms of preparing you for your upcoming studies. So what we're going to do this morning is we are going to introduce basically how the programme works and what we're doing through this programme. And then we'll talk a bit about understanding mastersness, which is the way we're framing what we are talking about in terms of the expectations that you're looking to aim for as a postgraduate student. What are we expecting of you as an institution in terms of what you're trying to achieve throughout your postgraduate studies? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So just to note, for both people here live and for people watching along with the recording later, the slides for the session are available on Moodle. Hopefully you have already engaged with the Moodle and found the links, hence why you're here or watching along. So the slides are available on Moodle. So if you're watching live, don't worry about writing down everything. If you have any questions as we go through, because we have such a high number of you split across YouTube and across Zoom, we won't be really using the chat or the session here to answer any questions. So instead, what we'd encourage you to do is via Moodle, go to the Q&A forum and add any questions you have there. But of course, check the FAQs first as well. We have answered a lot of those frequently asked questions already that you might have about the program on Moodle. And for those of you here live, Lucy has just posted that in the link on Zoom. But again, if you're watching along on YouTube, you can find all of those things on Moodle. So any questions you have about the program, please use the Q&A forum. Remember also that we do have our Q&A session this afternoon. So if you have any questions more broadly around postgraduate study, please make sure you add those to the Mentimeter for this afternoon session, which again, you'll find on the Moodle. Okay, anyway, back to today's class. So first things first, if you haven't done this already, and this is mainly for future sessions, or if you're joining any of the workshops, please make sure that you have updated your Zoom name. This is particularly important for the workshops because it means that our colleagues that are running the workshops will know what you want to be called in the session. So make sure that you have updated your Zoom name. And I would recommend you choosing some sort of avatar as well, some sort of image. It doesn't have to be yourself. It can be your favorite cartoon character. It can be your pet. It's just nice for us when we're running classes, even if you don't have your camera on, it's nice to see some images there. So make sure that you do that as well. Secondly, just before we begin, what we want to do is find out a little bit about you. So if you can use the QR code on the screen here to join our Mentimeter and tell us either where you're joining from, what you'll be studying, and why you signed up for T2G Postgrad. So what is it that you want to get out of the program? What was it that encouraged you to come along here? So I'll give you a couple of seconds here to either write down this code or take a note of it or go to Mentimeter, and then I will switch my screen over to the Mentimeter so we can see where you're all joining us from, what you're going to be studying, and why you signed up for T2G Postgrad. Okay, so I'll just swap my screen over now, so bear with me 1 second. Okay, so let's see what we have. Oh, wow. Really good selection of different places. A couple from Glasgow, that's good to see, and some from Scotland. A lot of people from India, quite a few from the UK, Mexico. Wow, this is fantastic. Oh, and Dumfries, we see you too. This is great. So a big part of this program and why we run this program online is so we can get people that are able to join from wherever they are. We know you're not all going to be in Glasgow yet, so this is why we wanted to run this program online. So it's really, really fantastic to see so many of you coming from different places. Fantastic. I think that will keep going for a while. So I'm going to skip on now to the next question. So if you haven't completed that one yet, if we move on. So what will you be studying? Again, a really wide range here. So we'll discuss this a little bit later in the session, but just for those of you who are new to the University of Glasgow, we have essentially 4 colleges at the university, as we call them. So we have the College of Arts and Humanities, we have the College of Social Sciences, the College of Medicine, Veterinary and Life Sciences, and the College of Science and Engineering. So what that means is we cover pretty much every subject that you could potentially study, which you can very much see here, the range of things that you're studying. And it's fantastic to see so many of you coming from all the different colleges at the university and being so well represented here. Fantastic. So then lastly, let's flip over to see what it is you want to learn. Okay, so we've got academic lifestyle in Glasgow. I think that is one of the key things. It's obviously not just about academia, that you're actually, hopefully, if you're able to come to Glasgow, that you're going to be coming and living in a new city and trying to get the most out of that. Life skills in a foreign country, I love that. That's fantastic. Academic skills, that's what we're very much here to focus on. Meet new people, fantastic. Enhancing writing skills, coding skills coming up a couple of times. That's interesting. College culture and assessment and grading. So hopefully, again, that's something we're going to very much touch on in the program. So something we can definitely help with. Again, here, academic writing practices, that's something we're going to talk about in the program and what we as a larger team very much do. Being productive, we have a session coming up after this on workload and time management. So please make sure you come along to that. We're going to talk about artificial intelligence a little bit in our academic integrity session today. So make sure you come along to that. We're very much going to talk about the University of Glasgow, what our expectations are. Again, that's something we're very much going to do. And in terms of coming back to study when you haven't studied for a while, that's something that I personally hadn't been at university for quite a number of years before coming back to do my master's. So I wish this program had existed when I was studying. So hopefully we're helping you make that adjustment back to university. Perfect. So all really good things. I'm really glad to hear that. I think a lot of the things or a lot of the reasons why you've signed up for the course are things that we're very much going to focus on as part of the course. Fantastic. Okay, so just in the interest of time, I'm going to flip back to the slides so we can start working our way back through the rest of the session. But thank you very much for completing this. This is really good to hear that there's so many of you from different areas and different parts of the world. And there's so many of you coming from all the different colleges at the university. So we've got a really nice broad range of people studying different subjects. And great to hear that you're coming along to a program, and hopefully this program will help you with a lot of the things that you're looking to get out of T2G Postgrad. So give me 1 second again, just to switch my share. Okay, perfect. So back to where we were. So what are we going to do through this session? So the first thing I want to do is, because we haven't introduced ourselves, I'm just a random person talking to you at this point. So I want to introduce ourselves, myself and my 2 colleagues you can see in the screen here. So we'll start with that. And then we'll talk about the bigger team that we work in, student learning development. Then obviously I want to talk about the program. So what are we going to do through the next week, or almost week, through the T2G Postgrad program. And then we want to talk about the second part of the session, some of the key features of postgraduate level study via what this concept that we're going to be discussing a lot this week, mastersness. And don't worry if you're not sure what that is, that's what this session is here to do. We'll explain what we mean by mastersness and how that relates to these key features of postgraduate level study. What we're going to use this for as well is help you identify your strengths in terms of academic skills, and also those areas for development in your attributes, knowledge, and skills in relation to postgraduate study. Then we want to think a little bit about reflective practice. So some of you might have heard of reflective practice before. If you haven't, don't worry. Again, we'll talk a bit more about this later in the session. But what we want to use this for is to think about you planning your academic and personal development, and professional development rather, as well as your personal development actually, throughout your postgraduate studies. So what we want this program to be is the starting point on you thinking what it is that you want to achieve, what your strong skills are, and where perhaps you might have some work to do in terms of development, and making sure you plan for how you're going to develop those skills throughout your course. There's one thing that you'll hear probably quite a lot this week from different people, and I'm sure all 3 of us here will think the same, but master's study can be quite intense, and there's a lot of different things that you have to do in quite a short space of time. So a big part of this program is helping you think about the things that I, for one, didn't think about until much later into my course, helping you prepare for how you're going to make the most of your upcoming studies. So that's what I want to do today, to help you plan for your upcoming studies. But first, let's introduce ourselves, because I've been talking for a while without introducing myself. So my name's Dr. Stuart Purcell. I am the Induction and Transitions Manager here at the University of Glasgow. You can see that I'm joined by two colleagues, Dr. Claire Brown and Lucy McCormick, and the three of us make up the Induction and Transitions team here at the university. So we're a really new team actually, and this is one of our first main projects is running this program. And what we want to do, or what our larger aim is to help improve students' experience of transitions into, through, and out of the University of Glasgow. So for you, this very much means that transition from undergraduate level study into your upcoming postgraduate level study. That's what this program is here to hopefully do, help you make that step a lot more easily. But we also work within a much bigger team. So within our bigger team, we also work on that transition through your programs and indeed out of the University of Glasgow for when you eventually leave us. So the bigger team that we work within is called Student Learning Development. So who are Student Learning Development? So the broader team we work in is a team of sector leading learning developers, maths and stats advisors, and peer learning facilitators here at the University of Glasgow. And what we all try and do as a larger team is there's obviously the part that we focus on, myself, Claire, and Lucy, which is that main kind of transition effectively through your various stages of study. But that's also something all of the effective learning advisors, or ELAs, and our advisors here in SLD do. And what we're here to do as a wider team is help you develop your academic literacies. So what do we mean by academic literacies? We mean all of your academic skills, your essay writing skills, your argumentation skills, your presentation skills, all of the things that make you a successful master's level student. And we're here to do that. So one of the common questions we've received already through emails and messages is that people have tried to sign up to some of the workshops and they're already full. There's so many of you in attendance here that we can only offer so many spaces on the workshop just by the capacity of our team. We're not a really massive team considering we do everything we do for the entire university of over 30,000 students, and we're a team of, I think, around 14. So we have offered as many spaces as we can. Hopefully, we're going to try and see if we can up a few of those capacities in the workshops later in the week, but we'll see what we can do. But if we can't, or you can't find a space on the workshop that you wanted to attend, don't worry. It's not the only chance you'll have to engage with your effective learning advisors for your college or to get engaged with that sort of material. Our effective learning advisors will be in touch when the new semester starts with full timetables of all the classes and workshops that Student Learning Development offer. So don't worry if you can't sign up to certain programs here or you're going to miss certain classes because you have other responsibilities, whatever it may be. There will be more opportunities to engage with us as a wider team throughout the semester and throughout the rest of your time here at the University of Glasgow. So we do that through our open provisions. So that's classes that you can attend. You don't have to enroll. You can just come along. And also we have a range of different Moodles. So obviously you'll have used our T2G Postgrad Moodle site. We also have several more of those once you start university here that cater to your college, and we'll have those open provision classes on things like essays and dissertations, presentations, etc. You might also find that when you're actually in your courses here at the University of Glasgow, that a member of SLD might be teaching on your course. So we often teach across the whole university, where we'll come in and teach a session in your course on something like, again, academic writing, argumentation, effective presentations, something about academic culture. So you might find members of the Student Learning Development team teaching actually within your course itself, within your timetable. What we also offer is one-to-one appointments. So you can also make one-to-one appointments with our team where perhaps you are working on an assignment and you're thinking about the planning for that assignment and you want to get some advice on how to plan your essay. Or perhaps you've had some feedback on your writing or in a presentation or some aspect of your work and you want to put together a plan for working that feedback into your future academic practice. So how you can improve using that feedback. These are all things we can do through our one-to-one appointments. So the link to the SLD website is on the slides here. I encourage you to go and have a look and find out more about what we do as a team, but also do pay attention to your emails. I know you will get a lot of new emails when you start your courses, but look out for the one that comes from Student Learning Development, from the Effective Learning Advisor or ELA for your college, a lot of who you'll meet throughout the rest of this week. And that will have the timetable for our classes. So that's something to make sure that you don't accidentally delete or ignore. Make sure you look out for that. Okay, so that's who we are. Again, you'll meet quite a lot of us throughout the program. So what does the program look like then? So what is the next 4 days going to look like for you? So hopefully this all kind of makes sense. We've explained this through the Moodle, which I'll talk about shortly, but just to give you an overview of the program. So we're obviously on Monday the 12th at the moment, so you're currently in the course Introduction and Understanding Mastersness, either in or watching this along later via recording. This color, this kind of blue color we have here, this flags up our core sessions. So these are the ones that we think that all of you should be coming along to. It has something for every single postgraduate taught student. These are things that are not subject specific, but are important for all postgraduate students to know. So that's why these are in this kind of blue color. So what we have after this session at 12 o'clock is our workload and time management. Again, something for all students. Again, after lunch, we have academic integrity. Even if you studied in the UK before, or if you've studied at the University of Glasgow even before, it's worth coming to this session because we'll talk more about the expectations at postgraduate level around academic integrity. And part of this session will also talk about how you can use AI and how you can't use AI in terms of your coursework as well. So that's quite important at the moment. So make sure you come along to that one. And then the last session we'll have today is our postgraduate reflections and Q&A session. So that's where we're going to have some of our graduate teaching assistants here in SLD. So these are current PhD students who have recently finished their own master's courses. And we're going to have 4 of them talk about what they wish they'd known at the start of their master's course. So where you are now, they're giving you the benefit of their experience to tell you what they wish they had known at the start of their study, so you can hopefully learn those things at the start of your studies rather than later, like so many of us did. And then what we'll do following those presentations is myself, Lucy Claire, and some of our colleagues will be there as part of a Q&A panel. So any questions that you have about anything to do with postgraduate level study, to do with being an effective student at postgraduate level, please make sure you add them to the Mentimeter for that session. Again, that Mentimeter is linked on Moodle underneath the heading for the SLD postgraduate reflections and Q&A session. So make sure you ask your questions there. Again, even if you can't attend, please do still ask your questions and then you can view back the recording. Okay, and then the last core session is tomorrow at 11 o'clock, where we'll be talking about building strong working relationships as a postgraduate student. So these are all of the core sessions that we think that you should attend regardless of what you're studying. Then you can see we have these sort of pinky purple sessions. These are the ones that are tailored to your college. So this is the first session tomorrow is assessment and feedback in your college. So one of the things I'll talk about shortly is how to find out what college you're in. What you want to do here is come along to the session that aligns with your college. This is where the effective learning advisors for your college will speak specifically about the expectations in your subject areas. Okay. And again, in terms of the workshops, I've discussed the workshops already, but these are aligned to your colleges as well. So your college of study. So again, if you've been able to enroll in the workshops, that's great. If you haven't, don't worry. We will still engage with this sort of material and let you know about the timetables for future sessions in the new semester via email, as I said. And then as we move into Wednesday, we have more of these optional workshop sessions. We have our maths and stats sessions in the navy blue there. And then we have the green for our international student sessions. So the way this whole program works is kind of like a conference. So if you haven't been to an academic conference before, it's where you essentially choose what sessions are most useful for you to come to. While we're suggesting you should come to all of the core sessions, these ones in the lighter blue color, the rest of the sessions you should pick based on the college you're studying in the subjects you're studying, or where you're coming to us from. If you're studying in the UK, perhaps for the first time, then the international student sessions are obviously encouraged. Then as we get to Thursday, again, you've got a bit of a choice here in the sessions that we're running. We have in the morning, first thing, our peer mentoring for postgraduates. So that's our peer mentoring facilitator here in SLD. We'll talk about what it means to become a peer mentor, why you might want to do that, how that can benefit you and what the process is. And then throughout the rest of the day, we have colleagues from across the student services part of the university. So we have representatives from the Disability Counselling and Wellbeing team coming to present. We have people from the researcher development team coming to talk about thinking about PhD level study, if that applies to you. And then we also have our careers and employability and opportunities team coming to talk about thinking about your career. Then in the afternoon, we have our library support team, so how to get the most out of our library here. And then lastly, we have our student representative council coming to talk about the support and advice they can offer you as a postgraduate student. So as I've said on Moodle, and as I've explained, the core sessions here, so everything in the light blue on Monday and across Tuesday, and including that morning session on assessment and feedback in your college. And then all of the sessions on Thursday are recorded, so you can catch up with them in your own time later. So for example, on Thursday, if you want to attend the thinking about a PhD session and the careers and employability session, but you can't because they're on at the same time, don't worry, you can catch up with the recording of the session that you're not able to come to live. Now, again, one of the main questions we've already had is around, are the workshops going to be recorded for people who can't make it? Unfortunately, we're not going to record the workshops. And this is partly because the workshops are based around discussion with students, and students will be involved in discussing coursework, discussing ideas. So this is a privacy issue. We can't make that available to everyone. So I'm afraid we can't record the workshops. But as I said, we will run similar types of sessions later in the first and the second semesters of your study. So don't worry if you're not able to attend, there will be another chance to attend similar sessions later. Okay, so all of this information is again on Moodle, and the timetable is available separately on Moodle, and there's also an accessible version there as well if you need to use that. So just in terms of the Moodle, briefly, I'm sure most of this kind of makes sense. The Moodle should be relatively self-explanatory, but just as a kind of broader comment, when we say Moodle, Moodle is basically our virtual learning environment. So when you start your studies, most of your courses will use Moodle to host all of the resources, all of the lecture materials, all of the things you need to engage with as part of your course will be hosted on Moodle. So obviously we're doing the same to give you that experience of what it's going to be like when you start your course. So the first thing to think about on Moodle, if you haven't done it already, is starting here. Obviously, the Get Started section should be self-explanatory. That's where you want to start. That basically explains a lot of the things we've touched on the session today in more detail, how to start with T2G Postgrad. Of course, if you have any questions, as I've said, make sure you first check the FAQ section. We've answered quite a lot of the common questions already here, so it's much easier going there than having to wait for us to reply to an email. And also, if you're not sure or your question isn't answered there, you can use the Q&A forum as well, remember. Now, the important next step is to choose your college, because this then filters some of the material that you'll see throughout the rest of the Moodle. So if you're not sure what college you're studying in, there's a link in this section which gives a list of all the kind of subjects that you can be studying. Okay, so you can find your subject and that will tell you what college you are in. If you're really stuck with this, maybe have a look at the website to find the course that you signed up for, and there'll be some more information there as well. Basically, you should be able to find this on the website. Okay. Then once you've picked your college, you will see the college appropriate sessions for you in the college specific sessions and the college specific workshops. So again, if you pick the correct college for yourself, you will see those sessions appearing that are applicable to you here. So what we suggest you need to do is we need to enroll to attend, the college-specific workshops, the maths and stats workshops, and the international student workshops. These are the ones that you need to sign up in advance to attend. Again, if you haven't been able to, don't worry, there will be more opportunities to engage with SLD in similar sessions later. These ones, again, so the core session this morning, the student services session, the peer mentoring session on Thursday, you don't have to enroll. You can just attend those. So it's only the workshops that you have to enroll for. Everything else, you are absolutely free to attend. And again, if you're not sure here about anything, use the Q&A forum and we can try and answer that as soon as we can. Again, for the sessions that are recorded, we will put these here just as soon as we can after the session. Obviously, we're running almost back-to-back sessions each day, so it might not be till the end of the day that we get the recordings up, but we will put them up just as soon as we can after the sessions. And then the last thing to engage with here, or the second last thing, is thinking about the program resources. We'll put all the additional resources outside of the lecture slides, things that we think will be useful for you in this section here. And we're going to talk a bit about reflective practice shortly, but all of our reflective practice resources will be in this section here. And the last thing, remember at the end of the course, we have our little congratulations and next step section. So I know that's right down at the bottom right-hand corner, but just remember that exists, and we will remind you of this at the end of the program. So just to summarize about the T2G course program, attend the core sessions. Please come along to these if you can, or view these online. These are really important and central things that will help you transition more effectively to your postgraduate level study. Choose your workshops and other sessions based either on your college that you're studying in or your needs and interests. So if you're, for example, an international student, try and sign up for the workshops. If you are interested in thinking about a PhD, maybe come along to that research or development session. If you're thinking about your career and the next steps, maybe come to that session. If peer mentoring is something you're interested in, then maybe come along to that session. Okay, so we know that there are times when there's multiple sessions on at the same time that you would like to come to, but one of the things that you'll need to learn as a postgraduate student is that there's so much going on that you would like to be involved with or you'd like to do, but your time is limited. So it's about learning to prioritize what are the most important sessions for you, and also learning when it's important to be at a session live or be engaging with that there and then, and choosing what you can catch up on later. So we're aware that sometimes you'll want to go to more than one session that's running at the same time, but part of what you're doing through this program is learning to prioritize in a way that will help you as you start your studies. And make sure you have a look at the program resources. So don't forget these exist, particularly our reflective practice resources. This is a big part of what we're going to be talking about throughout this session, this idea of reflective practice, which we'll come back to shortly. And this is so you can identify your strengths and areas for development, and this will help you choose the sessions that you want to attend throughout postgraduate, T2G postgrad, but also throughout your postgraduate studies as well as you continue. And all of the additional information around this is in the program brochure, which you can find again on Moodle. But what I'm going to do now is pass across to my colleague Lucy, who's going to talk a bit about understanding mastersness.
Great, thank you so much, Stuart. So hi, everyone. The picture that you can see on the screen just now is called the facets of mastersness, and it's something that you'll see quite a lot during T2G postgrad. So the name facets of mastersness is a bit of a mouthful, and I should say that it's not one that we invented. It basically comes from a piece of research that describes the key attributes, knowledge, and skills that we're looking for you to develop and gain as a master's student. So what this does is just to help you understand what the university expects of you during your master's year. And the knowledge and the skills and attributes are called facets, and they're listed from 1 to 7 around the outside of the shape. So each one's got a different colour and a different icon. So you can see abstraction, which is facet number 1 at the top there, and then they progress around to complexity, which is facet number 7. And what we as a team added to this research was to put well-being right in the centre there as what we've called the underpinning principle. And it's at the centre because basically looking after your well-being is essential to develop each one of these facets and to succeed in your course overall. So we'll go into detail about these facets shortly. Stuart, would you mind just skipping back to the previous one? Thank you. We'll go into detail about each of the facets shortly. But for now, what you really need to know is that the facets of mastersness can be a really useful tool in 3 key ways. So firstly, understanding what exactly the difference is between undergraduate and master's level study. You're probably going to hear a lot that there's a step up in terms of what's expected at postgraduate level, but it can be difficult to understand what that step up looks like in practice or how to work towards it. So we've structured T2G Postgrad around this framework, the facets of mastersness, because it helps you to break that down. Secondly, it then helps you to break down where your personal strengths are. So most of us are going to be stronger in some of these facets than others, whether that's because we've had more experience in them or we just have a natural aptitude for some over others. And it shows you what you personally might want to develop in order to succeed in your master's course. Finally, what this then means is that you can manage your time effectively on this course, but during your studies as well, so that you can achieve your goals, because you're targeting what you need to develop the most. So in the next part of the session, we're going to take you through an overview of what each of these facets mean and what they might look like in practice. And then after the break, it will be over to you to identify where your strengths and development areas are, and this will then inform which T2G postgrad sessions you choose to attend. Okay, so looking at wellbeing first then, the headline that you can see on the screen is, as we just said now, that mastersness is underpinned by wellbeing because you can't succeed as a master's level student without looking after yourself. So what does this look like in practice? Well, it will differ for everyone, but some examples might be, firstly, developing coping strategies to manage your stress levels. Secondly, recognizing multiple roles and identities that you have to manage during your studies. So one of those roles and identities will obviously be that of a student, but you may also be juggling, say, parenting or caring responsibilities, for example, or paid work. And one thing that can be useful to prepare for is the challenge of switching between the person that you are and the things that you have to do in one role versus another, and looking at ways to smooth that transition, however that works best for you. It can also be important to draw clear lines between what your role is and what is someone else's. So, for example, in a group work project, so that you don't become overworked and overloaded. Finally, it's always important to look at how you're taking care both of your mental and your physical health. And that's something that we'll signpost to during T2G Postgrad, particularly on Thursday, when the Students' Representative Council are going to share sports and societies opportunities with you, and the counselling services will take you through the mental health and wellbeing support that's available to you as a student here. So we're moving more into the academic side of things with the first facet, which is abstraction. So simply put, abstraction means the ability to take pieces of knowledge or meanings from a range of sources and then use those pieces to put together new knowledge or meanings, a little bit like building blocks. And you may have done this during your undergraduate studies, but it becomes much more important at postgraduate level, effectively because rather than demonstrating that you know what's been said about a subject already, the focus now is on taking what is known, picking that apart, and then using those pieces to build something new. So in practice, abstraction might look firstly like reading critically and analytically. So that means thinking not just about what a text is explicitly telling you, whether that's a novel or a piece of academic writing, but what it's not explicitly saying and how that affects its meaning. So things like why it was written, who it was written for, who was it funded by, any prejudices the author might have. And all of those pieces of information then become those building blocks that you use to construct new knowledge. Then the synthesizing sources, so bringing together lots of different pieces of academic work on a particular topic and showing how they can work together to create something new. And finally, applying concepts to your own work. So, for example, taking one of those building blocks that we've been talking about and making that the foundation for your new idea or argument that you're putting forward. So moving on to depth of learning then, this is another facet that you probably started to build towards at the end of your undergraduate studies. The most obvious example would be a dissertation or a final project. But again, it becomes much more central when you're a postgrad. And the headline here is that depth is about increasing your knowledge and then using that knowledge innovatively. So let's break down what that looks like. Most obviously, it's just increasing the knowledge you already have in a narrow topic, which is a really key part of learning at this level. What that will include is engaging with up-to-date research in your topic. So making sure you keep up with academic journals and books being published in your subject so that you're following and engaging with an ongoing debate in real time. And you might also start to engage with other subject areas who think about the same topic you're working on in a different way from you or from each other. So, for example, in my postgraduate work, at one point, I was reading work on meditation by academics in neuroscience and by academics in Buddhist studies, who obviously brought quite different perspectives and approaches to the same topic. And finally, depth of learning also comes from reflecting on not just what, but on how you learn. So part of this is finding out where your limits are. What are you struggling to grasp? What skills do you need to get to the next stage? And Claire's going to talk about this more in the reflective practice section of the session after the break. Facet 3 is called Research and Inquiry, and the headline here is Taking a Critical Approach to How You Carry Out Your Research. So we talk a lot in academia about the critical approach, and it can be difficult to pinpoint exactly what that means, especially if you're coming from an academic culture outside of the UK. Basically, it means going beyond just understanding what other academics are saying and getting into the habit of always asking questions about what you're reading or what you're hearing. So, for example, firstly, do you agree with this argument? Why not? How did this person arrive at their conclusion? And were their research methods valid? Are there maybe other possibilities they haven't considered? Who else agrees or disagrees and why? And one first step towards this understanding is how scholarship works in your field. So in practice, you'll be looking at, okay, so how does scholarship work in the field I'm researching in? What are the specific rules that I'm expected to follow as someone doing this research? Are there specific kind of sources that are considered appropriate or inappropriate? Or ethical protocols or processes that should always be followed? And how should referencing work? Once you understand this, you can then look at other people's research processes in that critical way to see where their strengths and weaknesses could lie in terms of their conclusions. And this understanding of scholarship will help you to show research and inquiry skills when you write, for example, a research proposal for your own work. And it also helps to develop your own viewpoint or argument and to gain expertise in your own discipline's research skills. So I'll hand over to Claire now to take you through facet 4, which is autonomy.
Thanks, Lucy. So facet 4, as Lucy just said, is autonomy, and this means taking responsibility for your own learning. Now, it's important to emphasise that autonomous doesn't mean isolated. It's really important to note that. You need to be proactive, you need to be responsible, but you can expect as a postgraduate student to be working in partnership with academic staff and with your peers, and to have support from other staff across the university in a variety of areas as well. And as Lucy already mentioned, and Stuart, there'll be a lot more on that side of things in the sessions on Thursday. So we're talking about autonomy within a community, and this is what we had in mind when we chose the graphic for this facet with the multiple hands coming together. So again, what does this look like in practice? It could look like directing your own learning, very autonomous act, but again, think about the support that you might have from staff and peers to help you go in the right direction and keep on track. Organising and planning effectively will be important, and the next session on workload and time management will address this in particular, and it'll also talk a little bit about motivation as well, which can be a key part of that sense of responsibility and making sure that you're staying on track and your autonomous motivation is there. It's internal. It's not just having somebody telling you what you need to be doing. And this will also be a key strand that we'll be looking at throughout the T2G postgrad. So working proactively is in there, again, with others, locating appropriate sources, developing partnerships, all of these things, things that you're doing on your own and things that you're doing with other people, but that you're driving that autonomously. Some examples of those kinds of partnerships and working relationships might be things like departmental knowledge sharing groups, but there'll be a lot more on that and the kinds of examples of how to build those sorts of working relationships in tomorrow's 11 o'clock session, which Lucy will be running. So moving on to the fifth facet then, we're into unpredictability. So this is the recognition really that learning and research don't always go smoothly. All of us have to deal with the unexpected. This isn't just confined to academia, this is life in general, but certainly as a postgraduate student, you can expect that some things will happen that you didn't predict. What does this look like in practice? The first thing is recognizing that knowledge is provisional. Now, this means starting to see that knowledge isn't something that's static and certain, it's something that shifts around and it changes. The more that we look into a subject, the deeper that we go, the less certain things can actually seem. At undergraduate level, you probably spent a lot of time learning what's already been said in your subject, whereas at postgraduate level, you become that more active partner in the conversations happening in your subject area. Just like Lucy was talking about, keeping up to date with literature and the research that's happening in your subject area. So you're there as part of that conversation. And as you are more active, you can actually see that things are a little more unclear, that actually the facts that you took for granted actually can change as research progresses and develops. In some subjects, your course will be preparing you to solve real-world problems. So in things like engineering, for example, or in teaching or in law. So you're dealing with this unpredictability that's inherent in a changing environment. So that will be something that's maybe a stronger focus in your courses than in others. Reflective practice is a really helpful tool for working through uncertainty in these sorts of situations. And if you are in a sort of professional program, something like teaching, for example, then you may well have formal methods of reflection, which again, we'll come on to talk about a little bit more later. But whatever subject that you're studying, then thinking about reflecting on your study practices. How have you managed when things haven't gone to plan? How have you dealt with that unpredictability? There's a lot that you can learn and develop through those processes. So working through managing uncertainty in your research as well. So there's unpredictability in your study practices and in knowledge, but also when you come to do research projects, you're likely to come across things that you didn't expect as well. So thinking about how you're going to manage that. The sixth facet then is professionalism. So as postgraduates, there is a shift here from being considered just as students, as undergraduates, to being considered more junior members of an academic community. So this has an effect on the behaviours that you're expected to demonstrate. So you are members of the community, you have different sorts of relationships developing with staff and with your peers. And again, this is something that we'll unpack a bit more in the session with Lucy tomorrow morning. Like in any workplace, academia has certain norms that we base our ideas of what professionalism is on. And some of these are around academic integrity, which Stuart has flagged up already, and there's a session on that at 2 o'clock this afternoon. And essentially, this is making sure that all the work that you submit is yours. You haven't plagiarized, you haven't taken other people's ideas, even unintentionally, and passed them as your own. So that's holding yourself to these high standards of academic integrity. You may also have things like building professional networks and relationships within your subject area, within your department, maybe within the wider profession if you're in a more vocational program as well. Following ethical requirements in your research. Again, this will affect some of you more than others, and you will receive guidance from your subject staff if this affects you. And you may, if you're on a professional postgraduate course, have professional standards, not set by us at the university, but within your occupation that you'll need to become familiar with and work within as well. So it might be lots of things to think about, but there's academic professionalism and then potentially professionalism associated with your future career that you're training for. So the seventh and final facet, thanks for your patience as we go through these, the final facet is complexity. And this recognises that you will be dealing with complexities within your subjects, but also that learning itself is complex. So complexity isn't just about the content of your studies becoming more difficult. It can mean things like making more sophisticated, more complex connections between a variety of theories and ideas, for example. So you might encounter complexity when you're approaching a topic from a different perspective. So maybe using approaches from another discipline to look at an issue in a different way, which Lucy already mentioned. And this can mean being open, opening yourself up to new ways of thinking about issues. So what seemed simple when looking at it from one point of view within your particular subject area might suddenly appear more complex when you see it through the lens of another subject area. But that can also be quite exciting because it can then lead you to new solutions as well. And then thinking about the learning process, it's acknowledging, again, that your knowledge is limited, that all of our knowledge is limited, and it's trying to find where your limits are. And again, that can help you to be more open to new ideas, make new connections that you hadn't considered before. So again, it's going back to this idea of knowledge being provisional, which we came across in the unpredictability facet. So an awareness of your learning and of your subject matter being more complicated than you realised. So lots of things going on within that complexity. So I'm aware there was an awful lot of information that we've just conveyed there. It can be quite hard to grasp some of these ideas, and in a sense that is part of what they're about, because we've already seen from the mentee that there's such a variety just within the group on this in this session today in terms of where you're coming from, what subjects you're studying. And so these facets are deliberately very broad, and you'll find that there's overlap between them as well, just as I was saying, between complexity and unpredictability, for example. And that is deliberate. And we've tried to give you some examples of what these facets might look like for you, but they might also look a bit different for you in your particular subject area. We can't pull examples for all of the different subjects that you'll be studying. So it's up to you really to take these and to reflect on how each of these facets manifests in your own subject. So keep it in mind during any of the college-specific sessions or any of the workshops, if you've managed to book onto those, and think about how they apply in your subject area. And you can take these on throughout your postgraduate studies as well, and just be thinking about how they look in your subject and how you're doing with them as well. Do remember that the facets relate to how you learn, not just what you learn. So, for example, taking responsibility for motivating and organising your learning in the autonomy facet, or developing your analytical reading. So those processes of how you learn, it's not just about the content, which obviously you'll be spending a lot of time on the content, but taking a step back and thinking about those processes is really important as well. So this model can be used to help you reflect on and plan for your development as a postgraduate student. And we've chosen it for T2G Postgrad because we think the facets are a really useful framework for doing this. However, they are just one way to look at things, to frame things. Some of you will find this more useful than others. That's absolutely fine. The key takeaway really is understanding, developing an understanding of what's expected of you, the skills, the attributes, the behaviours, the knowledge, and then using that to help you plan and develop effectively as a postgraduate student. So we're about to take a break for 10 minutes to recover from all of those facets that we've subjected you to there, and maybe do a little bit of processing of that. And then we're going to come back for the second part of this introductory session, and we're going to start looking a little bit more practically at how you might put the planning process into practice. During the break, please add any questions to Menti that Stuart's mentioned already. For the in fact, Lucy's put for those on Zoom. Lucy's put that into the chat. So the Q&A Menti, which is linked from the Moodle if you're joining us on YouTube. And that will be for this afternoon's Q&A session. So do remember, we're not able, because of the numbers, we're not able to take questions within the Zoom or the YouTube at the moment. So please post those up in the Menti. The other thing to do during the break is please download the mastersness quiz. So you'll find that on the Moodle if you go to this session under the core sessions, and you scroll down, you will find, and for those on Zoom, Lucy's shared the link for this as well, you'll find a download that you click and you will get the mastersness quiz. So if you could please try and do that during the break, that would be really helpful, because we'll be using that directly when we come back after the break. So thank you so much for your patience and for listening, and we will take a 10-minute break and then resume at around about 11:05 for those who are joining live.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, welcome back everyone. Thank you for joining or rejoining this introductory session. So just as a quick reminder, or for anyone who's just joining us, in the first half of the session, we introduced ourselves as the Induction and Transitions team. So that's our manager, Dr. Stuart Purcell, and then my colleague Claire and I, who are Induction and Transitions advisors. And we're part of the wider student learning development team here at University of Glasgow. So the first thing that we did was to take you through the structure of the T2G postgrad programme and how to sign up for your sessions, and to introduce you to the concept of mastersness, which contains some of the key features of postgraduate study. So if you are just joining this session now, please do feel free to access the recording of this session to catch up on those first couple of points. We'll post the recording on the course Moodle as soon as possible after we finish up, so maybe check back at the end of the day. In the next half of the session, what we're going to do is to use the mastersness framework that we've discussed to identify your personal strengths and development areas across these key knowledge, attributes, and skills that we're looking for you to build at postgraduate level. And then Claire will introduce you to reflective practice, which is a tool that many of us use to plan our academic and professional development, and which we'd really encourage you to take up as part of your postgraduate studies. Okay, so if you downloaded the mastersness quiz during the break, brilliant. If you didn't, I will drop a link to it in the chat now for anybody that's following live. And you can also find it on the course Moodle under the section for this core introductory session. So I'll pop that in the chat just now. There we go. And I will take you through how to complete it and then give you some time to do it yourself. So as you can see from the image on the screen, the quiz asks you to rate how much you agree with 3 statements from 1 to 5 relating to each facet of mastersness plus well-being. So 1 is a rating of not confident at all, and 5 is a rating of really confident. So for the well-being section, which Stuart has just highlighted on the screen, the first statement is, I have effective coping strategies to manage my stress. I'm fairly confident about that one, so I've put a 3. I'm not massively confident about the second statement, so that's a 2. But I'm fairly confident again about the third statement, so that's another 3. And I've then totaled my answers in the total box at the bottom, which comes to a rating of 8 overall. So I'll give you 10 minutes or so now to complete the quiz. Once you have completed it, if you just go to the Menti using the QR or going to menti.com and entering the code you can see on the screen, and vote for any of these facets that came to a total of 9 or below. What we're doing here is just giving you a sense of where you and your peers are at, but your responses are totally anonymous, so no one will be able to see what you voted for. So I'll just give you that 10 minutes now, and then I'll share the Menti and we'll have a look at the results together. Thanks everybody that's completed the mastersness quiz and the Menti voting already. I'll just give you a couple more minutes to finish up so that we've got a good sense of where everybody's at, and then we'll come back. So 2 more minutes. Hey, thanks everybody for voting. So as you can see, there's a really clear interest in 2 particular areas from all of you, which is well-being and research. So I just want to highlight a couple of sessions that you might find really useful on T2G Postgrad straight away. So for anybody that's looking to really deepen and extend their research skills, your first port of call is your college workshops. So these will be specific to the college that you're studying in, and they'll really focus on those key skills. For well-being, I'll take you through the process of signing up and seeing which facets match to which sessions just shortly, but definitely earmark for a Thursday, the counselling and well-being session. The other 2 that are coming up quite high are professionalism and depth. So for professionalism, I would say you would definitely want to check out the academic integrity course that's running today, and also the workplace relationships course that's running tomorrow. But I'll take you through in much more detail now how to match these development areas that you've identified with the courses that we are running. I can see that a few people are raising their hands. I'm so sorry, just because of the way that the course is structured and the numbers that we're dealing with, we're not able to use Q&A or ask you to unmute here. What would be brilliant is if you could use the Menti Q&A that we've linked to and that's available on the Moodle. Pop your questions in there and we'll answer them during the postgraduate reflection session this afternoon. Okay, so thank you again so much for sharing. If we could just move on, that would be fabulous. And I will take you through the sign-up process for T2G postgrad courses. So as you can see, you've got the course program, which lives on Moodle and is shown on the right of your screen just there. And every course in the course program is listed with the mastersness facets that it covers. So for example, in the academic integrity course, you can see that it targets both autonomy and professionalism. And then in the postgraduate reflections and Q&A sessions, you've got well-being there, autonomy, professionalism, 2 others. And then in the final session, you've got building strong working relationships. So we've got well-being, autonomy, and professionalism again. So the takeaway here is that when it comes to selecting your optional courses, the development points that you've just identified during that mastersness quiz are a really good way to choose between the options on offer and make sure you're attending the courses that best suits your needs. So I think that is all from me. So thank you for your attention, and I'll pass you over to Claire for the final part of the session, which is going to focus on how you can continue to develop your learning through reflective practice.
Thanks, Lucy. Yeah, really interesting to see how everyone's feeling about those facets as well, and interesting with the strong need to look at that well-being, which was certainly why we were keen to include that in with the facets, put that as the central underpinning principle. And I hope that those of you who identified that will go on and follow that up and really try and think about how you can address that right now before you actually start getting into that intensity, as we've mentioned, of your postgraduate course. So I'm going to build on this process that Lucy has just taken you through, really by looking a bit more at this reflective practice, which we've kept mentioning through the early part of the session. And we're now going to focus in on reflective practice as a tool for planning your development as a postgraduate student. So I want to go back onto the Menti, and what I'd like you to do on the next question is to just rate what your understanding of reflective practice is and how much experience you've had with reflective practice. So just two quick questions there. If you've never heard of reflective practice before we started going on about it today, that's absolutely fine. You can indicate that in your anonymous rating. If you have experienced it before professionally or academically, then you can indicate that as well. Stuart, if we can switch over to the Menti screen again, that would be fabulous. Okay, so I think those little sliders seem to have settled down there. So we've got, I understand what reflective practice means in an academic context, sitting pretty much bang in the middle there. So half of you who have responded have an understanding of what that is, and maybe half of you don't, or maybe some people are in the middle there. So we've got a bit of a mix in terms of whether you've heard of this before and whether you know what that means in academia. So if you'd all said that you knew exactly what it was, then that would make me redundant for the next few minutes. So I'm glad I've still got something to contribute. And then some of you have got some experience of professional or academic reflective practice, but maybe some of you sort of aware of what it is, but haven't really used it. So this is something that we would encourage you to look at and think about and consider using when it comes to your development. It's something that is increasingly used really professionally, and maybe that's where some of you have come across it, particularly in areas like health and education. It might look a bit different in academia, but there are some shared principles that we can talk about. So interesting just to gauge where people are at. And I hope that by the end, I'm not going to ask this again, but if I were, then hopefully by the end, you'll have a bit more of an idea of what we're talking about. So if we could switch back over to the main presentation slides, and I'll talk you through what reflective practice is all about. Okay, so we're talking about using reflective practice to plan your development. So the first thing to try and get to the bottom of is what on earth we mean by reflective practice. Okay, so in essence, it's a practical, structured way of examining your past experiences in order to learn from them and inform your future actions. And this learning part, the future actions part, is significant because it is action focused. So it's about understanding what's happened or what you've thought, what you've done, why things have happened in a certain way, and then using that examination, using that knowledge in order to try and change things for the future. Okay. So sometimes in everyday life, we might reflect on things and only do the first part of that process and just think, oh, what happened there? Maybe why did that happen? But this is a slightly more formal idea of reflective practice where you move beyond those to examine things more deeply in order to understand the why. And then importantly, to use that in this development sense, the planning sense. What are you going to do with this information? How are you going to go forward and change things for the better? So, as I've mentioned, this reflective practice does have its origins really in professional fields, so things like teaching, health, medicine, social work. And these are contexts where you've got a really dynamic and really consequential interactions going on between professionals and then others, whether that's students in the classroom or patients or clients. So as we've said, some of you who may be coming from those backgrounds might have had experience of that, or if you're going into courses in those areas, then that kind of reflection might be built into your studies. But for everyone, regardless of what your professional background is or what course you're going into, then using these techniques in your university studies can be really beneficial as a way to understand better how you learn, what the limits of your knowledge and your learning are, which was something that we touched on when we were talking through the facets earlier, and then how to build on those things, build on that knowledge in order to improve your results or to help you get to your end goal in the course that you're undertaking. When we're thinking about the other end of this process, when Stuart introduced our team, he talked about how we're looking at your transition into your course at the university, through it and out of the other end. And in that context, it's useful to note that this kind of reflective practice is widely used in careers contexts as well. So planning your career goals and how to reach them. So this isn't something that is confined to postgraduate study or confined to the university environment. It's really something that we're borrowing in from other places because it's something useful, and you can take it beyond the context of your postgraduate course and use that in your future career planning as well. So in a university setting, let's think specifically about that here. One practical way that you can employ reflective practice is when you're working with your feedback. So you're going to get formal feedback when you start to submit assignments. So that will be from staff. And it's important to pay really close attention to this and not just look at the headline grade, because this can help you to understand where to focus your development, maybe engaging with student learning development, and thinking about how you can actually address the things that come up in your feedback. And looking at it in the big picture can help as well. If you've got multiple pieces of assessment and you're getting feedback coming in from different places, maybe you can look at those together and find commonalities. You can see, well, there are patterns here, or there are things that I really need to address. Or maybe thinking about whether the feedback that you receive matches what you expected to receive. And if there's a mismatch, really trying to examine what's happening there, and how can you adjust those expectations. Can you have a more accurate idea of what's being expected of you through that assessment? How are you going to do that? And as I said, remember that this is future focused, so it's not about looking at that feedback and just looking at it as something to do with a past event of handing in that assignment, but it's how do you use that constructively going forward. So things like booking onto an SLD workshop, or clarifying expectations, or making sure you understand marking criteria, for example. There's also informal feedback that you should think about there as well, when you're interacting, not just in assessment contexts, but if you're in the classroom, you're working with peers maybe, or having different kinds of interactions, there'll be a lot of feedback that you can draw into that as well. When we were looking at the mastersness facets earlier, if you were with us at that time, we talked about looking at issues from different perspectives as well, and not just accepting one answer or one way of understanding an issue. And reflective practice can be a really important tool in trying to do this. So you can take an experience that you've had, for example, and consider whether your own attitudes, your beliefs, your biases might have affected maybe the processes that you chose to go through, or the conclusions that you reached, or maybe the literature that you decided to read on a topic as well. So there are lots of ways that this can happen. It can be a difficult thing to try and unpick, and this is where this structured reflection, reflective practice can really help you. One example might be, say, in a group work task. So maybe you go into a group and you make assumptions about people's skills within the group based on stereotypes, based on biases that you hold that you might not even have been aware that you held. Or maybe you believe that a certain approach was right in tackling a group task and you found it difficult to be open to other approaches. Okay. Try and be open to thinking about those things and unpacking it and trying to understand what's happening there, maybe how it affected the group dynamic in this example, and what you might be able to do to address that in the future. Reflection can also be about making connections that you might not otherwise see. So you might, for example, say you're struggling with motivation for a certain task that's required on your course. Through a process of reflection, you might realize that you're more motivated when you can see a clear connection between the task that you're undertaking and the end goal. So that's a connection in terms of your learning processes rather than within a subject area. But that's a connection that you might make, and you might then plan to find out more about the rationale behind the task. You might speak to peers on your course. You might speak to a member of staff. Or maybe it's something quite different. Maybe it's that you struggle with motivation with this particular task because you always try and do it after lunch when your energy levels are really low, if you're like me, and you might try to plan scheduling that task for a different time of the day. And this is something, the sort of thing that we'll talk about in the time management session that follows on after this. What else is reflective practice? The final point there is about relating theories to experience. So this can be particularly relevant in professional contexts. For example, if you're studying in the School of Education, you might use a theory of learning to understand why an activity in the classroom didn't go as planned. But you can also apply that for your own learning as well. Let's say you come across a theory in some of the work from the effective learning advisors, if you're on a workshop in the T2G Postgrad or in one of the other sessions once you're in course. And that might give you some further insights into how your learning works, for example. And you can relate that to your learning experiences and deepen your understanding of yourself and how you learn. So there's a few what's in there, which I think also bleed into the why of reflective practice. I hope that you're starting to see that there's some real benefits to reflective practice. The top one of which is that it can help you to be more successful in your postgraduate studies. So I'm sure that you're all here, you've all signed up, you've chosen to come along to T2G Postgrad because you want to succeed, you want to do well in your postgraduate courses, and here's another tool that you might be able to use to help you with that all the way through your course. It is also included as a graduate attribute. So this is a list of things that as a university, we want all of our graduates to come out with. The things that we think we can help you to develop, that we can offer to you as things that you can benefit from by studying at the University of Glasgow, and being able to be a reflective practitioner, to be a reflective learner, and someone who can take that forward into professional life as well is included in there. It also allows you to set more effective learning development goals. So we keep talking about all of these things that are available, particularly through student learning development. And if you know what it is that you personally need to work on, then you can have those goals for your learning development, whether that can be addressed through student learning development as a service or within your department, for example. But you first need to know what it is you're trying to develop before you know how to go about doing that. It can also help you to review your performance, not just in a sort of numbers, what did I score on this test, but overall a much sort of broader, deeper idea of how are you performing, and also things like, and how is that impacting on your mental health, on your well-being, looking at this holistically and thinking how you can continue to plan and develop. For some of you, the why will be a little bit more mundane, and it'll be about being a requirement of your professional development as well. So some of you will have assessments which are reflective. You will be given a lot of guidance on how to complete that, what kind of structure that should include, how you should go about doing that. Finally, it does help you develop your adaptability. If you're doing this deep dive into experiences that you've had, ways that you've worked, ways that you've been learning, ways you've been thinking, and looking at how you can improve those going forward, why things are happening. It can make you adapt better to different environments. Again, this goes back to the facet that we were looking at earlier around unpredictability. So that will come up, things will happen while you're studying that you didn't expect, and being able to adapt to that changing environment is a really important skill to have. So I hope I've convinced you with that reflective practice is a really valuable thing to look at and think about and experiment with and see how you can have that working for you. So I've got a bit of an idea here, which we've put onto the Moodle, which is how you might actually put this into practice within T2G Postgrad. Okay, so this is a space where you can start to play around with reflective practice and see what you like, see what might work for you. And we've got some ideas and a little toolkit that we've put into the Moodle to help you to do that. So have a look through it, pick and choose what you might want to try. You might try one thing and decide it's not right for you. That's fine. It's ways to get you thinking about this and how are you going to reflect on your practice? How are you going to develop? So one thing is that we'd encourage you to use the mastersness facets to help you reflect on your strengths and your areas of development. So that's like we were just doing there with Lucy, going through and answering the quiz and thinking about where your strengths and areas for development lie. So that can be an ongoing process. You can continue to think about that. And then using this reflective practice toolkit that we've put together for you, which includes this template, which you can see on the screen there. So this is specifically designed for T2G Postgrad, just for you to record some ideas, some reflections based on the sessions that you attend, whether you attend them live or you follow up on some of the recordings, whether it's the sessions or the workshops. This could be a useful way for you to frame your reflective practice. So it's quite simple. You just put the title of the session that you're attending. You afterwards think about what you learned. So just some headlines. Don't try and put everything that was included in the session, but just the key things that resonated with you, that you feel you've learned that you didn't know before. Then think about why this is important to you. Why did you pick that thing as the thing that you felt it was worth recording? Or why is it challenging maybe? Maybe it relates to an area that you're feeling less confident about. Maybe it's something to do with that research process that a lot of you flagged up as a facet that you were less confident with. Or maybe it's something that connects with a prior experience. Maybe you'd had a positive or negative experience in that area in the past, and this is something that might help you to develop confidence in it or to build on that strength already. The next section is your what next, your action planning. So I keep mentioning this, that this important part of reflective practice is what will you do with it? What action will you take following it? So this could be something like I plan to book onto an SLD workshop. Maybe you haven't been able to get a space in the T2G Postgrad program to attend the workshop that you would like, and you can put that into your action planning, that once you get that email from SLD that Stuart mentioned, that you will then follow that up and make sure that you book onto something that is relevant for you. And then you can mark it off as complete if you decide to use this format. And you can do that for each of the sessions. You can have multiple action points, you can have multiple learning points in there, and it's just an idea of a way that you can structure that reflective planning. So do have a look on the Moodle. You can find that in the tile that is specifically for the reflective practice resources. That's all in there, and lots more information that you can read through and have some guidance on as well. So I've already touched on this, but I really want to emphasize that your reflective practice isn't just some mad thing that we've invented for T2G Postgrad. It's not just for this space. It's something to take out of here, practice with it here, experiment. Nobody's looking, nobody's judging what you're doing, see how it goes, and then take it forward. So the point of this is that it helps you plan for your development, not just now, but throughout your postgraduate studies. So it might only be once you start your course that you realise what it is that you actually need to work on. So maybe the things that you were feeling least confident about, you find actually your feedback on that is okay, but there's another area that you didn't realise. So keeping on thinking about it, reflecting and planning is really important. So please use the Postgrad, T2G Postgrad resources that I've mentioned, and this whole space of these 4 days to experiment with this reflective practice, try and build it into your learning and development. And then the more that you've done that in this space before it maybe feels like it really counts, then the better equipped you're going to be going forward, not just into your postgraduate program, but also into future developments and planning, as I've mentioned, even towards future study or career progression as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Claire and Lucy. So before I move to the next slide, I really should put a different slide in here. So if you just bear with me 1 second, I'm actually going to jump back. Okay, where have you gone? This is the joys of screen sharing with lots of people watching when you lose your slides. There we go. Apologies for that. What I wanted to do was actually just jump back to the session aims really quickly, soon as we're sort of coming up to the end here. Oops. Do it the slow way. It's not wanting to let me do it. There we go. So I just wanted to jump back to these really quickly, just to remind us of what we've given you a lot of information. We're very, very aware of that. So I just want to remind you of what it was we were trying to do through this session this morning. So the first thing is to introduce ourselves as the Induction and Transitions team, which hopefully we've done. We've been on the screen long enough today that hopefully you know who at least the 3 of us are, but also that broader student learning development team. So I know that a lot of you here are thinking about your development, you're thinking about your courses. You might have a lot of different questions about academic literacies and how you can get some help to develop your writing skills or your presentation skills or whatever it might be. That's what we're here to do. So again, remember that that goes beyond just this program. We're here throughout your studies as the wider SLD team. And of course, as we've all mentioned several times, we will have the Q&A session this afternoon with a few members of our colleagues, a few colleagues from SLD. So do ask any questions you have using the Menti there, and we can answer them this afternoon. We also wanted to introduce the T2G program and just kind of give you an idea of why we've put the program together the way that we have. And we wanted to talk about this expectation of postgraduate level study. So what are we looking for you to do? I know that again is that main concern that you have as a postgraduate student. It's how is this different from what I've done before? What are the levels I'm trying to achieve here? And that's why we've used this idea of mastersness. It's these different facets of mastersness that help you think about all the different skills, the knowledge and the attributes you're looking to work on. And again, thinking about those ones that you already are quite strong in, but thinking as well for those areas of development and starting to plan now for how you're going to develop them during your course. Again, if I can jump ahead slightly before we get to the reflections this afternoon, one of the things that I had in my mind going into my master's was that I was going to take all of these additional opportunities to engage more with additional resources, come to the kind of classes that we in SLD run. And because I didn't really think about it before my course, I didn't start to make plans. My course started, and before I knew it, I had assignments due, and I just hadn't planned effectively. And it's much harder to plan once your course starts and you start having coursework and assignments. So that's why we're running the course now when we do, and having you hopefully think about those reflective practices and tools that Claire was just speaking about to start to set yourself up to succeed. So that's what we've wanted to do this morning. So the next thing we'll do is jump all the way back forward. Excuse me, while I'm going through all this, just to put that slide there. Hindsight is 2020. Again, which is why we're trying to give you the benefit of our experience of the things that we wish we'd known at the start of our course. So if I get back to where we were, there we go. So what we want you to do now is go back to the Mentimeter and tell us basically if you think we've managed to achieve, first of all, the things that we set out to do that I've just worked through, the session aims there. And then thinking more about that reflective practice piece. So thinking about why you signed up to the program and thinking about now that we've explained how it's going to work, as well as some of the future opportunities that the wider student learning development team will hopefully provide you. Think about one action you're going to take that will help you get what you're wanting to get out of the program. And then lastly, most importantly, because this should be hopefully beyond all of the absolutely valid concerns you have and worries, it should still be an exciting time, hopefully, for you, undertaking postgraduate study, moving to Glasgow perhaps, and thinking about that. So tell us what you're most looking forward to about being a postgraduate. Now, remember, again, as we've mentioned several times, we're really sorry that we just can't, through the virtue of the numbers and the recording and so many different reasons, we can't take individual questions during these sessions. But please do check the FAQs first of all, then add any questions to the Q&A forum. If you get to the forum and you're confused by it by any means, just there's a button that says add a discussion topic. That's basically asking a question. So you add a new topic and just put your question there, and then that way we can reply to you there. But otherwise, you go back to the Menti, and I'll just give you a couple of minutes to fill that out, and then I'll switch over to the Menti, and we'll finish up this morning's session before this afternoon's sessions. Okay, so I'll just switch over. Hopefully you've all got the Menti from before anyway. And let me just flip on. Okay, that's relatively good. I'll take this. Hopefully we've managed to do everything as effectively as we hoped we could. But again, of course, the recording will be here. We know there was a lot of material here and there's a lot to get through. But the idea was to basically just give you everything you need so that when you start attending the rest of the sessions throughout the program, you sort of understand why we've done what we've done and start to think about your own development and thinking about what sessions you should attend. But again, the main thing here is it's not just about this course. It's about thinking about what you do after T2G Postgrad as well that we've been trying to do here. So I'm glad that a lot of you seem to think that we've managed to achieve this. So that's a good start, hopefully. But again, any questions, use the Q&A forum, check the FAQs, and of course, any questions more broadly about postgraduate study and how you can develop your academic literacies, etc. Anything about the University of Glasgow that's not around registration and enrolment or funding or anything, because unfortunately we don't know anything about that. We can't answer those questions, but we can answer on postgraduate development, how you can develop your learning, how you can be a successful postgraduate student. So do ask those questions there. And in terms of actions, focus is good, excellent. Citing and practicing, yep, really good. Time management, come to the core classes. I obviously really enjoy that. Looking for research projects that align with your interests, that's fantastic. Keeping up to date with lecture staff and pointers, fantastic. Integrity, excellent. Again, a session for that this afternoon. Working hard, again, fantastic. How to deal with change, a really big part of being a postgraduate student. And if you don't know, again, that's fine. This is just the first session. You've got a whole week's worth of sessions to think about this. Staying up to date, using the facets, fantastic, excellent. So again, really glad to see that you're already thinking ahead and planning to how you can make the most of the program, but also plan for your academic development. And then what are you most looking forward to? This is always a fun one. Meeting new people, that always comes up. That's one of my favorite things about postgraduate study for me, for sure, was meeting a lot of like-minded people who are interested in the same things as me, but perhaps had different life experiences than me. Just learning in general, networking, student life, research, thinking about your career, coming to Glasgow and exploring. Again, I don't think we've mentioned it here yet, but if you haven't already had a look at our Glasgow Essentials resource, do have a look at that. There's a lot of information there on making the most of life in Glasgow. There's a lot of postgraduate students, current postgraduate students who have made videos there that you can follow, that they're, again, learn from their experiences. We'll post up a link to Glasgow Essentials on the Moodle as well, just so you've got it, but do have a look there as well. But that's fantastic. But I'm glad to see that you're hopefully looking forward to postgraduate study, and also hopefully looking forward to the rest of the week, because we're very much looking forward to working with you for the rest of the week and engaging with you throughout the rest of the program. So let me just stop my share and flip back to the slides. And essentially that brings us to the end of this morning's session. So we've got about 10 minutes before the next part starts. So the next session will be my colleague Claire will be talking about workload and time management. So this is where we sort of flip over to the actual sessions proper. We've sort of introduced the program. We've given you the rationale for what it is that we're doing and why, and hopefully started you thinking about your own personal development. Now, whether or not time management and workload is a kind of issue or something that you struggled with before or not, we would of course very much recommend that you come along to these courses. I was studying for a very long time. I've been working for a long time now, and I'm still very much learning time management skills and new tips and tools and techniques all of the time. And I know that Claire has a lot of good information around that and tools, tips, techniques, and pointers in this session. So what we'll do is we'll turn off our cameras for now, take a little 10-minute break, and then back to pick up with the workload and time management session. So we hope to see you again joining us soon, or if you're watching along with the recordings at a future date, please do go and watch the workload and time management recording next. Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone, see you soon.
Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back. If you haven't joined us already for the introductory session, my name is Claire Brown, and I am one of the induction and transitions advisors, along with my colleague Lucy, who's here as well to help me out today. And the next session between 12 and 1 this afternoon is on workload and time management. We'll be getting started in a couple of minutes. I'm just going to get the slides up on the screen and give a little bit of time for other people to join in on the Zoom call and on the YouTube live stream as well. And then once we get started, I'll be recording that and we will go from there. Okay, thanks for your patience, everyone. And again, welcome. This is the second session in the very first T2G Postgrad. And this session is on workload and time management. And if you weren't here when I introduced myself before, my name is Claire Brown, and I'm an induction and transitions advisor at the University of Glasgow, along with my colleague Lucy. And we're based within student learning development at the University of Glasgow. And if you missed the introductory session between 10 o'clock and 12 o'clock today, then do catch up with the recording on that when we give a bit more detailed information about ourselves and about student learning development. Yeah, it's that recording will be posted up onto the Moodle site. I would check back at the end of the day when we've had time to process those recordings and upload them if you did miss that. So this session will take us up till 1 o'clock, when we'll have a break for lunch, and I will do my very best to keep to time and not waffle on too much, which I do have a tendency to do. So we'll see how we get on. Workload and time management, that's quite appropriate. See how well I can manage the time for this session. So what are we going to do in this session? We are going to start off by thinking about time, which sounds quite abstract, but we'll just have a quick think about how we might consider time, what we think about it. We're then going to get a little bit more practical and think about postgraduate workloads. Think about what previous experiences you've had in terms of managing workloads and managing your time. And then we'll move on to some scheduling tips and tools, and some troubleshooting around the sorts of issues that crop up when you are trying to manage a complex workload and other things that are happening. What sort of things might you come across that might get in your way? And then looking briefly at particular problems and where you might be able to find help and support through the university. And then there are just a couple of readings at the end that you might want to follow up on if this is something that you're interested in. I do apologise if I keep looking to one side. I've got a second screen here which has got my slides on, so it might look a little bit odd, but that's what I'm doing. So to get started then, let's think about time. Now, I've seen that some of you have jumped the gun. You've leapt ahead and have started completing the Menti already. But if you haven't, or you want to go back in and put in another answer, so using the QR code here or going to menti.com and entering the code that's on your screen. And what I want you to think about is what words you associate with time. So my example, the first thing that came to my mind when I was thinking about this was the word spend. So I spend time with friends. I spend too much time looking at my phone. I want to spend more time reading novels. So spend is something that I really associate with time. And that's how I talk about it. That's how I think about it. So take a minute to have a think yourself and then add your word, or you can do multiple words, onto the Menti. And that'll generate a word cloud so we can see which are the most common in there. I have no idea what's going to happen here. Might be completely different to what I expect, but we will see what happens. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. While you're doing it, I'll see if I can switch my screen over so we can see the results. Okay. Lucy, can we see a word cloud appearing on the screen? Yes, marvellous. Okay. So we've got management in the middle there. I may have put that in your heads with the title of this presentation. We've also got limited, we've got spend in there, precious, valuable, waste, yeah, wasting time, use, yeah, rush, work-life balance, finite, can't control it, lack thereof. Yeah, I think I can relate to that one. Precious, sure if I said that one. Short, running out of time, scarcity, using it wisely. Yeah, some fantastic ones here. I can't read them all out, but yeah, worth going in and having a look at what everyone has put in there. Some really interesting things coming up. So I really didn't know what you were all going to say. I'm going to go back and after this session have a really good look at that and think about how you're all considering time, what you're thinking about it, what words you're using. So I think that's really interesting. So just bear with me while I switch the share back again. Okay, are we back on the slides there, Lucy? Perfect, thank you very much. Okay, so one of the themes that came out that this slide would have been redundant if it hadn't, if you'd all said completely different things. But one of the things that I thought would come out here is that we actually talk about time often in very similar ways to how we talk about money. So obviously my example was spending. We also had things like using it, wasting it, losing it, about it being this finite resource. And there then being an awful lot of things that we can use it, spend it, waste it on. Okay, so same goes for money. I think unless you're one of the very, very few people in the world who maybe feel like their money is infinite, most of us have a very finite pot of money, and we have all sorts of competing things that we want and we need to spend our money on. And we think about time in quite a similar way. So we have a pot of time, and we then have so many things that we want to use that time for. We want to spend that time on. So the tasks that we could potentially fit into that time can feel infinite. Maybe they are infinite, certainly feels like that. So what we're left with is something infinite that we're trying to fit into something finite. Okay, so this is where time management comes in, because the infinite tasks are never going to fit into the finite time. Okay. Now, I'm not going to tell you in this session all the methods or hacks that you might use to try and fit more and more and more and more tasks into the time that you have. That's a recipe for stress. It's a recipe for burnout. It's not a good way to go into what is going to be an intense time for you as you embark on your postgraduate programs. If you are interested in those things, there are a host of self-help books out there if you want to go and find them. But going back to what we were talking about in the introductory session, is that at the heart of what you need to think about going into postgraduate study is your well-being. So please don't try and fit ever more things into the same pot of time, because it's not going to work. We need to be a bit smarter than that. I can certainly have a tendency to try and do that myself. I know there's that sense that if only I knew those hacks, if only I could just be a bit more efficient, if only I could just squeeze things a little bit more, I could do everything. We can never do everything. So I'm not going to try and tell you that you can. So if I'm not going to give you a list of efficiency hacks, what is the point of this session? You might be wondering. So I'm going to come back to some research, because that's what I do. And in 2021, there was a meta-analysis of time management studies. As you can imagine, there's been a lot of research around time management, and there was a meta-analysis looking across a whole range of time management studies. And that meta-analysis found that good time management can lead to better academic performance, at least to an extent. And this makes sense because completing tasks on time is a core part of academic assessments. You'll have deadlines, and if you submit late, then you're likely to be penalised by a reduction in your grade, for example. So being able to organise your time such that your assessments are submitted on time is going to be beneficial. Interestingly, however, the same meta-analysis found that good time management has a greater positive impact on well-being and life satisfaction than it does directly on performance. Okay, so I think that's worth bearing in mind as we start thinking about time management and what it's actually for. So we all spending some of our time on things that don't have immediate tangible benefits or outcomes, but honestly, that's okay. Genuine unproductive time is space where we can physically and mentally revive, and if we really want to see that there is a tangible benefit in that, we can think of it as well-being time, and that lays the foundation for all the productive things that we do. Again, coming back to that mastersness graphic that we had in the introductory session and that you can find on the Moodle, which puts well-being right in the centre of postgraduate study. So I think there really are some useful things that we can learn about managing our time better. But again, it's not necessarily about squeezing more in or being ultimately efficient machines and being productive all of the time. So I like to think about it more in terms of aligning the tasks that you choose to do with your values and your goals. And with that good alignment comes increased motivation as well, which makes it more likely that we'll stick to any plans that we've made. So if you're choosing to focus your time on tasks that help you get where you want to go, then you're going to be more motivated to complete them and maybe will waste less time along the way. So as we work through the rest of the session, I will be giving you some practical ideas about managing time. I'm not just going to spend the entire period of this session going on about time and how we might think about it, but do bear in mind that there's no magic solution. And I hope that this just encourages you to think a bit more about the issues that you might face personally in reconciling that tension between time and tasks. So let's get practical. If time is a finite resource, let's think about the workload that you as a postgraduate student might be expected to spend that time on. Some of you might have thought about this a lot already, maybe when deciding whether you can actually undertake a postgraduate programme. If you haven't, it is worth doing. So you can see on the screen there that the first thing I've put on here about postgraduate workload is credits and hours. So every course that you undertake at the university will have a number of credits attached to it. And each credit notionally equates to 10 hours of study. Okay, so a master's degree is 180 credits, which my maths is not my strong point, but that comes to 1,800 hours of study. Okay, it's a rough estimate, and that would include all of your class time, all of your independent study, and so on. If you're not doing a master's degree, you're doing a different number of credits, then you'll be able to find that on your course information. And again, that can give you an indicator of roughly what you might be expected to do in terms of time, and then start to think about how you might split that up, which we'll come on to look at in a minute. So if we think about those hours that you're expected to spend on your course, there will be some requirements depending on the programme of study that you're on. So some of those will be fixed. So you will have class times, you might have lab times, you might have field trips, you might have all sorts of things that are set into your timetable and that you have to attend. On top of that, you will have flexible commitments, requirements for independent study. This will vary what the balance between the fixed and the flexible are, depending on which course you're on, but you will have a balance of both of those things. You'll also need to think about the duration of your course. So if you're studying full-time over 1 year, or you're studying part-time, or you're doing a shorter course, then thinking about how those hours might fit into the overall duration of your course is a good place to start. So those are the things really around the structure of your course and the expectations. Thinking beyond that, consider where you're going to be living while you're studying. Will you have to commute into the university? How often will you need to do that? How long will that take? Maybe you haven't worked that out yet. Maybe you're not in Glasgow. I know a lot of you aren't here yet, and maybe there's some uncertainty around that still. You don't know how long it might take on the bus and so on to get in. So that's something that is worth considering and working out and building into your planning. Many of you will also have other commitments. You might be caring, you might have parental responsibilities, you might have other things going on in terms of paid work, for example, which are to some extent fixed. There may be some flexibility in there as well, so that's something else to think about. Other things, holidays, we keep talking about well-being. I would strongly encourage everybody to take holidays and to factor that into your time planning. But probably thinking about that well in advance and having that built into your scheduling will be useful for you to keep on top of things. And do bear in mind the unexpected as well. So we all tend to get sick every now and again. So being aware that we might lose some days to illness as well, or family emergencies, or whatever it might be. So we'll talk a bit more later on about building in some flexibility. So we've got all of these competing workloads and different things demanding attention and demanding time. So you'll need to make decisions about what to do first and what to leave until later, or what to choose not to do at all. Some of you might find that visualizing this is useful. So I'm going to show you this for those of you who will find it useful. You might not, that's fine as well. And this is the urgent, important approach. So we've got a grid here on the screen with the numbers 1 to 4 on there. And what this is for is to try and get you to have a list of new tasks that you need to complete or things that are competing for your time and deciding what is most important for you to do. So what you would do is place each task that you have on your list on the axes based on importance and urgency. So urgency is the length of time before the deadline or the length of time that you have to before the task needs to be completed. And then importance is looking at the benefits of completing a task against the impact of not completing them. Okay, so what you would have is anything that's in sector 1 in the top left, that would be your highest priorities. You would do those first, and then anything in sector 4 in the bottom right would be the things that you would do last or not at all. Okay, so we're going to go back to Menti, and again, this might not work, but we're going to give it a go. And I've got an example for you that we are going to try and see if you can place things into the Menti in the same sort of grid. Just bear with me for a moment. And let's share this on the screen. Perfect, thank you, Lucy. Yep, this has popped up here. Oh, some of you are very quick at doing this. Okay, so we've got 5 tasks here. We've got read for assignment due in 4 weeks, attend lab session today, meet a friend for coffee, and so on. Now, the thing to bear in mind here, the slight confusion, is that you've got 2 sliders for each of these questions, and they're opposite. So to make sure things appear in the right place on the grid, high importance, the slider is right to the left. High urgency, the slider is to the right. Okay, so if you followed that, you're doing well. It's just to make sure the grid works correctly. So high importance, left of the slider, high urgency to the right of the slider. They're very slowly shifting around, these dots. Interesting. We've got virtually nothing in box number 1 in the top left, which is the most important and urgent, and nothing at all in the low urgency, low importance. Hopefully that's accurate and not just because everyone's confused with my opposite sliders. Okay, they've pretty much settled down there, I think. So it's interesting that attending the lab session today, we've got high importance, but low urgency. I wonder whether this is a confusion with the sliders. Maybe it should be over on number 1. I would say that that's quite urgent if it's today and it's a lab session that is a requirement of your course. Updating Instagram, I think, rightly is down in low importance. It's relatively high on urgency, which again could be an issue with the sliders, or maybe we've got people who do see that as something that is more time critical in terms of making sure that you are updating at a particular time. I'm not sure which of those is accurate. Meeting a friend for coffee in the middle. We can expect there to be some disagreements if we actually looked at the number of sort of individual dots, if you like, of where these landed, because to some extent it will depend on the values that you place on each of these activities. So, for example, you might see meeting a friend for coffee as important and urgent. If you place particular value on personal relationships, but also it will depend on the particular circumstances of that meeting, and if it's something that is particularly urgent for you or for the friend, or whether it's something that you can postpone to another time. So I think this is probably very inaccurate, given the confusion of the having to put the sliders the opposite way, but do really think about what is genuinely urgent, and what is genuinely important, and what isn't. Because remember that we're thinking about trying to fit these infinite tasks into our finite pot of time, and it's not all going to fit. So we are going to need to find the things that are in that bottom right-hand sector on this graphic and decide which ones we can put off till later, or decide that we're not going to do at all, maybe until after the postgraduate course, or until we get to the holiday, or until that assignment is completed. Okay, so you might have to make some difficult choices, and that's the reality of what can be this very intense time on a postgraduate course, and needing to try and prioritize effectively, understanding what is most important, what is most urgent, and making decisions based on that. And you might not get the decisions right all the time, but this might be a good way for some of you to try and plot those tasks, and make those difficult decisions. Okay, I'm going to go back to the slides. Hopefully you can see those on the screen there. And there was the Menti that I forgot to share to you. So well done, everyone, for completing the Menti without the QR code. It's very impressive. Okay, so that's one way of doing things. You might not like it at all, but you might want to give that a go and see how you get on. Let's think next then about your previous experience. So I know that all of you who are here watching live or watching the recording have got experience of managing your time. Okay, you can't get to starting your postgraduate course without having some experience of needing to manage your time for study that you've done previously, and probably for a lot of you for work as well. So think about the strengths that you have first of all. So you will all have strengths in this area. You've got to this point in life, you have some strengths in your time management. Okay, so think about what those might be. Maybe you've found some really effective planning strategies. You've got some study strategies that you had from when you've studied before that you might want to bring over. You might be a really focused person. This might be something that is a real strength that you have, that you can focus on a task really well. You might be really organized. Maybe that's come out in non-academic areas where you've got friends saying, oh, you're always the one who organizes things. You've got this skill in organization. Or maybe you're just really motivated, and I'm sure you've all got some level of motivation because you're here on T2G Postgrad and you're signed up onto your postgraduate courses as well. So how does that help you with your time management? And it may be that you're thinking about big things, big achievements that you've had in this area, or it might just be really small things that you can think of where you've managed your time well. Let's think then about the challenges that you might have. And I think we probably all have challenges here too. And I imagine if you're listening to this, you're here, then you face some challenges. I certainly have. Lucy's nodding there as well. Stuart, our manager, mentioned earlier that this is something that is still an area of development. And that's the case for all of us, whether that's staff sitting here and working with you, or your lecturers, or yourselves as you're going in and out of your postgraduate courses. So this is something that that we're all going to work on over time, and we can share ideas, we can share tips, and hopefully help one another to develop in this area. So there's lots of challenges that you might face are maybe procrastination. So when you're supposed to be focusing on a particular task, and the one thing you do is completely unconnected to it. Okay, and I'm going to come back to procrastination later. It's one of my challenges for sure. Or maybe you're easily distracted. Maybe you're paralyzed by a need to achieve perfection in your work. Perfectionism can be really difficult. That's all of these that I'm saying are definitely things that I've come up against in various places as well. Maybe you struggle with these competing priorities that we've been talking about, or maybe it's more to do with the environment that you're trying to study in. Maybe that's not conducive to good study, to good concentration, and that's actually getting in your way. And if you had better circumstances, maybe you'd find the time management a little bit easier. So we're going to come back to some of these as we go through the session, but I think maybe at some point during T2G Postgrad, if you take a bit of time to reflect on what your strengths are and what your particular challenges are, I think that can be a really useful point for you to start and then think about planning how you might tackle some of those challenges and how you might build on those strengths as well. So that's really applying a reflective approach, which again is something we talked about in the introductory session. And you can maybe think about the things that might trip you up, the challenges, but also can you team up with other people in your course, for example, and share some of your strengths? So let's say you're good at organisation, but you struggle to complete tasks because you've got a tendency towards perfectionism. So maybe you could team up with someone who's really strongly motivated to complete tasks. They don't have the perfectionism issue, but they may be lacking when it comes to organisational skills. Can you team up? And help one another and use both of your strengths together. So remember that you're not expected to do all of this in isolation. You have to be self-driven. You have to have your own motivation. You have to have some autonomy. But you should also think about how you can work with other people as well to maximize the success for all of you. Also note that some of the items on the list of challenges are internal and some of them are external. So how you address those might vary. So I already mentioned the study environment, for example, that's an external factor. And maybe you've got less control over that than you have over some of the others. Maybe you've got more control over that than you have over dealing with perfectionism, for example. So have a think about that and what you might be able to do. And as I say, we'll come back to some of these as we go through the session. So far, we've looked at workload expectations at postgraduate level, a bit about prioritising tasks and about your previous experience of managing your time. And I think one thing that pulls all of these things together in a practical sense is to think about scheduling. So that is allocating specific time to specific tasks. So I would say start by looking at the big picture. So step back from it all, and this might be easier at this point before you've actually started. You're not overwhelmed, hopefully, yet by all of the little tasks that you've got to complete. Look at the big picture. What are your assessment deadlines once you can find those out, once you're on your course Moodles? What other deadlines might be coming up? Things like PhD application deadlines, funding deadlines, things to do with career development, for example. So try and take that step back and think about what those big picture deadlines and timescales are. Once you know those big deadlines, then think about breaking those huge tasks into small tasks. And I'm going to come back to this because it's so important when you're scheduling, just putting in write an essay for this date or revise for this test, it's not going to get you very far in terms of managing your time. So that you then want to think about prioritizing and scheduling those smaller tasks on a daily or weekly monthly basis. Okay, so chunking things down, starting with that big picture. Where do you want to get to? Where do you need to get to? What are the requirements? And then break it down. What do we need to do to get there? Getting organised early is really important. So start now as much as you can. I know you might not know your assessment deadlines and so on, but it's great that you're here and listening to this session and already thinking about how you're going to manage your workload. And if you've got a plan in place for how you're going to deal with it once you get all the course information through, things like those deadlines, then you're going to put yourselves in a really good position. So one thing in terms of this sort of early planning is deciding what tools to use, and we're going to look at them next, some ideas of what tools there are. I would say try not to get too distracted by playing around with every tool there is out there, but now is probably a good time to think about that when you haven't got maybe so many competing priorities at the moment. And again, do factor in other commitments that you've got as well. So jobs and caring responsibilities, downtime, all of these things that you do also need to schedule in. Some of those things will be inflexible. There might be others that you can get help with, or you can put off until your studies are over. So I said we were going to look at tools, and this is what we're going to look at here, because in practical terms, you do need to decide on what system you're going to use for scheduling your tasks. And there are maybe an overwhelming number of tools that say they can help you with this. So we could look at paper tools. So maybe a diary or a study planner. So some of these are specifically designed for students, but just a standard diary is also not a bad idea. Advantages of that is that you can carry it with you. You can make notes in it without needing to be online or to have a device with you. And some student planners do have dedicated pages for things like recording assignment deadlines or readings or all sorts of things that they include there that they think might be useful. Another paper option is a wall planner. I love a wall planner because I can see for that big picture planning that we were just talking about, you can see at a glance where you are in the year and how many days and weeks you've got before that big deadline. You can block out periods when you won't be able to work, such as your holidays, and it's a really nice sort of visual representation that you can really see how much time you've got available. Obviously, that's not so useful for the smaller task scheduling. You can't put all of your little tasks in there, but some of you might find that having that on the wall in your workspace is actually a really helpful way to visualize what you're working towards. There are also a range of digital options. So I've put very few on here. There's so many that you could choose from, but I've put a few on here. So you can get a variety of mobile apps. So things like Clockify allows you to schedule, but also to track what you're spending your time on. So if you want to keep a close eye on how long tasks are taking you, or how much time are you spending reading as opposed to writing, or how long are you spending doing all sorts of different tasks that might be associated with your particular course, that might be something that you want to have a look at. You can also just use the standard calendars and reminder functions that you'll have on your phones. They can just be a useful way to have that literally in your hand that you can see and get notifications on your phone if that's something that helps you and the way that you work, to remind you what you should be doing or when you've got a deadline coming up. You might want to use something a little bit more sophisticated in terms of online tools. So things like Microsoft Outlook and Microsoft Planner. So these are things that you will be able to access once you have your University of student login details. So you will have, as a student, a Microsoft Office 365 subscription through the university, and so you will be able to use these tools, and you can use them collaboratively as well if you're working with other people on your course, so that can be quite useful, and there are guides on how to use those through the university website as well. And then there are alternatives to that, things like Trello, which I'm going to show you in a moment, or My Study Life, which is specifically designed for students and managing workload as a student. So a few ideas to have a look at. Maybe you've used some of those before, maybe you haven't. Maybe you want to have some kind of combination and find what works for you, or just take a guess at what might work and then see how it goes. So I'll just show you a couple of, that's Clockify, the two screen ones, little picture there, and then just a standard calendar showing on the mobile as well. So I'll just show you a couple of these ideas. So one of them is Trello. I quite like this format, and the example that I've got here is just a student planner, and it's laid out in columns. So you create whatever columns work for you. I've put assignments on the left there, so a list of what your assignments are, and then you can attach deadline dates to those as well. As they come closer, those little dates will turn yellow, and then if you miss them, they turn red, which is hopefully not going to happen, but it gives you that visual indicator again. And if you tick them off, they go green, which is quite nice. To the right of that, I've got three columns. I've got to do, doing, and done. So I quite like this as a method to have a list of all the things that you need to do. So I've got some examples in there about arranging a meeting with one of the lecturing staff, doing some reading, making a decision on an assignment, visiting the library, applying for PhD funding. So all sorts of things that you might have, different tasks in there. And you can add tick lists within those as well to break them down into smaller sections. Once you're ready to start working on that, you can move it into the doing section. Once it's complete, you can put it in done, and feel proud of yourself as that column grows. So I quite like this visualization of it. Maybe it's something that you want to play around with. Again, all of these will work for some of you, and for others they won't. So it's just a case of trying to flag some of these up and give you some ideas. So quite a similar view is this is Microsoft Planner, which, as I said, you will all have access to once you've got your student logins. This one is set up specifically for a dissertation project example. So when you do come to your end of program project or your dissertation, then you're likely to need to do some specific project planning and apply some of those time management skills to that project. So this is set up slightly differently in terms of the columns that it's got. So supervision meetings, and then in this case, this would be a sort of essay-based dissertation. So introduction literature review, can't say that today, methodology, and so on, and tick lists. And again, you get the different colours that you can use, you get things ticked off, and you get that real visual representation of the tasks that you need to complete, and some organisation. So definitely worth thinking about using those sorts of tools, and how that might help you to organise when you've got lots of different things going on, and it can be easy to lose track of what you're doing, what you're supposed to be doing. And when it comes to the dissertations, I'd also flag up, even at this early stage, that as it comes nearer the time, there will be dedicated sessions through student learning development, through the college effective learning advisors, on working towards your dissertations and projects within your college as well. So do look out for that and some more detailed help that you can get in that area. So I'm going to move on to some troubleshooting as we come towards the end of the session. Thanks for your patience. I hope you're all still with me. I've put this section in because once you've made your schedule, you've got all your plans, it's easy to think that your work is done. That's it, I'm organised, I'm sorted. What could possibly go wrong? The reality is a lot can go wrong. So the best laid plans very occasionally work out, but quite often need some revision, need some refinement. You need to find out what's working for you and what isn't. So we're just going to run through some common problems that you might encounter as a postgraduate student and a few tips for tackling them. So the 4 particular areas that I want to look at are distractions, procrastination, getting started and stopping, and then the unexpected. So the first one then is distractions. So you might schedule a study session, but you find that you don't achieve what you'd intended because you struggled to keep focused on the task. So firstly, I would say set focused, achievable goals for each session. The more specific you are with your goals, the easier it is to measure your success and the less likely you are to be distracted. So, for example, instead of scheduling a general study time or a time to work on this module, set a goal. So you might say you're going to read text X in this session, or you're going to write up yesterday's lab notes, or you're going to prepare 3 answers to present at tomorrow's seminar. So something really specific, and you know when you get to the end of that session whether you've achieved it or not. Secondly, consider when you're most alert. Okay, so you're much more likely to get distracted if you're not alert, and you'll have some tasks that really need you to be thinking deeply or concentrating hard, whereas others will need much less brain power. So you want to try and match the tasks to your level of alertness. So you can do this, you can make a little table if you wish, and think about what times of day you're actually most alert. This is definitely not me. By the time it's got to 8 o'clock at night, I am utterly useless. Whereas I would be much more of a 9 out of 10 at 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so this would look different for different people. So if you have a period of the day where you're particularly alert and you're trying to carry out a task that you keep getting distracted from, then you want to match those up. Okay, so have a think about that after the session. You might want to reflect on whether you thrive on routine or whether you find it monotonous to have the same study slots every day. Maybe you work better with a varied schedule that stops you getting bored, or maybe that novelty of a changing schedule is actually distracting in itself. Now, you might not have any control or much control over this, depending on what other commitments you have. Maybe you just have to study when you've got space in your schedule around parenting, caring, paid work, and so on. But if you do have the option, then it might be worth thinking about how you respond to routine and variety and which suits you better in terms of trying to avoid those distractions. Try scheduling in some distraction time. It is a reality. We all get distracted. So actually allowing for it is quite a good tip. Think about what your distraction activities are and when you might schedule them in instead, so that you know that you've made time for that and you don't need to do it now when you're trying to do some of your work. Think about reviewing your working environment as well. So this could be physically changing your working space or trying a different place to work, maybe coming onto campus once you're here, you've started your course, you're in Glasgow. Or maybe you could join up with other students and either in person or online and try and create a community study environment that might be beneficial to you. There are also things like study buddy apps. And the link on the slide here is to a series of YouTube study focus videos as well. So even if you haven't got or you don't want to have other students actually physically working with you, then you can create that same kind of positive study environment by having a video kind of work environment brought into your own space. So lots of different ideas that you might want to think about around your working environment. Finally, here I want to mention online danger zones. So these are the apps or the websites that we all have some that eat up your time. You might already know what these are, or you might maybe look at the records on your phone to see how much time you've spent on different apps, and maybe you'll be surprised how long you've spent looking at different things. Think about how you can manage that best, whether that's something really drastic like removing it from your phone, or just how you might manage that, how you might schedule again that distraction time, maybe put some limits on the app time you can spend on your phone, or like I say, if you're brave enough, actually taking them off your phone altogether, and the same with anything that you might access through your browser on your computer as well. So the second problem that I wanted to look at is procrastination, which I did already mention earlier. It's a really common problem. You've got a task or a list of tasks that needs completing, and you do everything else. Okay, so you choose to do all the tasks that aren't the one you're supposed to be doing. So why do we do it? There are lots of reasons. I've put two up here. One is when a task is too big, it just feels overwhelming, so you avoid starting it. Again, we come back to this idea of breaking it down into smaller chunks, make it something that's achievable, and then you're much less likely to procrastinate. Or maybe you just don't feel motivated. Everything else feels more attractive to do than the thing that you know you should do. Maybe the deadline feels like it's a long way away, or you just don't see the benefit of the task that you need to complete. If this is the case, then try to keep your goals in sight. Maybe set yourself an earlier deadline for the task rather than just working to the assignment deadline. So again, this is to do with that scheduling. It's to do with the breaking it down into small tasks that you can achieve. Or maybe you need to find out more from staff or from other people on your course about how that task that you're avoiding actually contributes to your overall course. If you feel that you understand its purpose, then you're likely to be more motivated to go on and complete it. There are different kinds of procrastination. So there are really obvious ones that are nothing to do with whatever study task you're supposed to be engaged with. So maybe you're on Instagram, you're hoovering, you're doing the washing up, whatever it might be. But there's also productive procrastination, which can be harder to spot. So maybe you spend ages writing lists, playing around with scheduling tools like I've just shown you, setting up a beautiful Trello board, and it feels like you're being productive, or you're doing library searches for hours and you feel like you're working, but you're not actually getting done the things that you really need to be getting done. Now, I know we're coming towards the end of the session, but I do very quickly want you to jump back into Menti, and I have put up the code this time, and just list your top procrastination tasks. I don't know why that keeps disappearing. I did have something that said top procrastination tasks, but it's disappeared. But that is what I would like you to put in, and I'd just like to see, partly to make us all feel better, that everybody procrastinates, everyone has those low priority tasks that we do instead of the things that we know we should do. So I'm going to jump back over onto Menti for the last time, and let's see what's happening over there. Oh my goodness, you are all very fast at this. Social media, sleeping. Sleeping is important though. Don't ditch all the sleeping. Doom scrolling, definitely. YouTube videos, video games, cleaning, yeah, housework, cooking, cleaning, housework. Yes, lots of that. I'm definitely guilty on that one. Music, daydreaming, yeah. So many things. Panicking without working, yeah. All sorts of things that can happen in irrelevant research, yes. So many things that can be our, or crochet, I quite like that one, that we do that maybe they feel productive, maybe they don't, but they're getting in the way of us actually completing what we need to complete. Okay, so I would love to sit here and just read all of these. I will go away and do that afterwards, and please do the same, but I'm going to stop sharing because I'm conscious of time, and I'm going to jump back over into our presentation. Okay, so have a think about what your procrastination activities are, and how you might manage those. And do bear in mind that those scheduling tools I showed you earlier can become procrastination activities, so just be careful. And there's a little cartoon there to show you that this is something that we all experience, so much so that someone's made a cartoon about it. Okay. The third problem that I want to have in this troubleshooting section is about getting started and stopping. I think getting started is the most common issue, that it's hard to get going. I would say those small tasks that you've broken down, again, are really helpful because they're achievable, they're measurable, and that can actually help you get started in the first place. You might find that routine is a useful way of helping you get started as well. If you just get into habits, you know that at this time of day, you go into this space and you start working. For some of you, that might be helpful. Accountability, so again, thinking about teaming up with other people on your course or someone at home. Tell them what you're going to work on, let them know whether or not you've done it at the end of the session. That can actually be really motivating. I've put Pomodoro in there, and that is linked from the slide if you want to go and have a look at that. This is basically a timer technique. So you work for a set period, I think it's 25 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break, and then you repeat that. So it's a structured study, and there's all sorts of information on how that works and how you can use that to help you getting started and continuing with your tasks. So worth having a look at that one. Again, think about your environment, whether that helps you or hinders you. Back to the time of day and the alertness again. So thinking about matching tasks and alertness. And the final one there is about rewards. So this really comes back to motivation. So unless you're engaged in a task that you enjoy for its own sake, you might need some additional incentive to help you get started, okay? And we might all enjoy our subject and our study to some extent, but individual tasks, we probably don't enjoy them necessarily for their own sake. We're doing them because we want to achieve a goal in our course. So some people respond really well to rewards. You might promise yourself a treat at the end of a session or when you've completed a particular task. So just another thing to think about. Lucy's nodding. I think she's a rewards person. So yeah, we're all different. That might be something that works for you. So have a think about that. For anyone who once they've started, struggles to stop. Again, the Pomodoro technique might be quite good because that gives you a really structured break system. You might also think about that peer support. So not just for accountability, but to help you stop your sessions and not overwork yourself. Like I said, don't ditch all of your downtime and your sleep in a bid to study all the time. That's not going to help you. And if not stopping when you need to stop is connected with neurodiversity, and that's something you need particular support with, then you can contact the disability service, and they'll be coming in on Thursday as well to talk to you. So just to flag that up as well. The final one here is just to return to this idea of the unexpected, building in flexibility. I'm not going to spend a long time on this because I have already mentioned this, but really just to flag it up again about thinking about setting your own earlier deadlines to give you a bit of space in case things go wrong, thinking about time for any IT issues that you might have, or sickness, family emergencies. You just don't know what's going to happen, but trying to build in a little bit of flexibility is useful. And the other thing is to communicate. This is really important. So if you think that you're going to have difficulty meeting a deadline, for example, then communicate with staff early, and it may be that talking to peers might help as well, to help you catch up with work that you've missed, or just to be a listening ear can be helpful sometimes as well. And there are also formal processes in case you do think you're going to miss a deadline, you need a longer extension, you can go through the good cause process, which again, I've linked here. I'm not going to talk any more about that, but that is a formal university process in case you do need an extension if something more serious and unexpected occurs. So a quick note on identifying problems. Just bear in mind that if you're really struggling, it might not be that you're bad at time management. There might be other things going on in there around mental health, around neurodiversity, about your understanding of what's required on your course. You might have things like perfectionism or self-sabotage happening, which are things that there is help to get you through those things. So again, most of these are linked for you to go and have a look at, but there are wellbeing masterclasses, which can help you with things like perfectionism and self-sabotage. There's the student learning development provision, which can help you with things like course requirements. You can speak to your course staff, you can speak to student support officers in your college, who you'll find out more about when you start your courses. And then, as I mentioned, there's also the disability service there as well. So there's loads of help out there. If things aren't going right, don't just assume that it's because you're no good at time management. Do think about whether there's something else going on and whether someone can help you with that. So in summary, I would say try and find out what is expected in terms of workload, specific commitments and requirements on your course. Find out where to get that information, talk to staff, talk to peers, look at all the information that you're given. Think about how you're going to prioritise those competing tasks that you're going to have. Choose how you're going to schedule those tasks, but without turning it into distraction and procrastination. Identify your own strengths and challenges and how you're going to work with your strengths and develop from the challenges that you're facing. And with that in mind, thinking about how you're going to find and use the support that's right for you. So I hope that's been useful, and you've taken at least one tip that you're going to follow up from that. All the slides from this session are available on the Moodle page, and the Menti is there as well. I'm going to be going and having a look at that over my lunch, and see all of your answers on there. And if you do have any questions, then do post them either in the Moodle forum, which you should be able to click. Lucy's shared the link there for those who are on Zoom. And the other place that you can post it is in the Q&A session Menti, which again is linked from the Moodle page, and that's for the Q&A session, which that's the session that starts at 3 o'clock this afternoon, where we've got staff and postgraduate students in there to answer your questions. So thank you so much for your patience and for listening for this hour. As I said, I do hope you've taken at least one thing from this session that you can use. And we are going to break for lunch now. You'll be pleased to hear. I'm certainly pleased to hear it. And then we resume at 2 o'clock, and that will be for academic integrity. So please do try and attend that session on academic integrity at 2 o'clock. Some really important information there, including information on using AI. So thank you very much, and we will see you soon.